Story 1. I heard my own voice call my name from the trees, and it happened while I was standing less than 3 feet from the only other person who could have spoken. Ethan. Clear. Calm. Exactly my voice. The problem was that my mouth was closed, and the ranger beside me had gone completely pale the second he heard it. Then my flashlight caught movement between the pines, a man standing motionless in the dark wearing my jacket, and before I could take a step toward him, the ranger grabbed the back of my shirt so hard I almost fell, and shouted, "Don't answer it." I didn't even know what it was. I just knew the figure had my build, my clothes, and somehow, when it turned its head, it already seemed to know I was looking at it. This happened 5 years ago, when I was 28, and working seasonal maintenance at a remote campground in Wyoming. It wasn't even supposed to be a scary job. Most nights involved fixing broken gates, checking generators, and making sure campers weren't starting illegal fires. The campground sat inside a heavily forested valley, surrounded by miles of wilderness. Cell service barely worked. Radio reception wasn't much better. Most people loved the isolation. After that night, I hated it. The strange part started 3 days earlier. I was replacing a damaged trail sign near the eastern boundary when a ranger named Cooper pulled his truck beside me. He looked distracted, almost nervous. Before driving away, he told me something that sounded completely ridiculous. He said if I ever heard somebody call my name after dark, I shouldn't answer. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh back. He simply repeated himself, then drove away. The whole thing felt so random that I forgot about it within an hour. At least I thought I did. 2 nights later, I was doing routine checks near the campground entrance when an elderly camper stopped me. She asked if the park had speakers hidden in the woods. That question immediately caught my attention. I asked why. She said she'd heard someone calling her husband around midnight. Her husband had died 3 years earlier. I assumed she was confused or exhausted. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. The voice wasn't asking for help. It was trying to start a conversation. I reported the encounter to Cooper. Instead of asking questions, he immediately asked what time she'd heard it. That felt strange. He wasn't surprised by the story. He was only interested in the time. When I told him midnight, he quietly nodded and wrote something in a notebook. Then he changed the subject. The next night, more complaints came in. A group of campers reported hearing someone calling names from the tree line. Another man claimed he heard his daughter calling him, even though she was asleep inside their RV. Nobody seemed panicked, mostly confused. But there was a pattern. Every report happened after dark. Every voice sounded familiar to the person hearing it, and every incident happened near the eastern trails. That's when I remembered Cooper's warning. Around 10:30 p.m., I checked the trail cameras near that area. Most footage looked normal: deer, foxes, campers hiking during the day. Then I noticed something odd. Several clips contained audio but no visible person. Voices appeared on recordings where nobody was present, names being spoken, individual names, quietly, casually, like somebody trying to get someone's attention. The timestamps bothered me even more. One recording contained my name. It had been captured nearly 2 hours before I arrived at work. I replayed it several times. Same result. My name, my voice, before I had even entered the park. I brought the footage to Cooper. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. Then he asked me not to tell anyone. Not management, not campers, nobody. That response scared me more than the recording. People hide things when they already know what's happening. Around midnight, I began hearing it myself. At first it sounded distant, barely audible, just enough to make me glance over my shoulder. Then it happened again. Ethan. Soft, familiar, close. I stopped walking. The woods were completely still. No footsteps, no movement, just darkness. Then the radio on my belt crackled. Cooper's voice came through immediately. "Did you hear it?" My heart sank. I hadn't reported anything yet. I asked how he knew. There was a long silence before he answered. "Because it always starts this way." That wasn't reassuring. I met Cooper near the eastern trailhead. He seemed exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. We stood beside his truck while he finally explained part of what had been happening. According to him, reports stretched back almost 20 years. Every summer, for a few weeks, people began hearing familiar voices after dark. Nobody ever found a source. No pranksters, no speakers, nothing. Most people ignored it. A few followed the voices into the woods. Those cases never ended well. Missing equipment, injuries, people wandering miles off trail with no memory of how they got there. Cooper insisted there was a logical explanation. Maybe sound distortion, maybe somebody playing games, but he admitted nobody had ever proven anything. Then my name echoed through the trees again. Louder this time, much closer. We both heard it. That's when the opening happened. The moment I still think about. The voice, the figure, the ranger grabbing me. After the figure disappeared into the darkness, Cooper practically dragged me back to his truck. I demanded answers. He wouldn't give them. He only kept repeating the same instruction. Don't answer, don't follow, don't engage. I asked who the figure was. He claimed he didn't know. The problem was that he looked like a man who absolutely knew something. Around 1 a.m., every camera near the eastern trails went offline simultaneously. Not malfunctioning, offline. The monitoring system showed active disconnects. Someone, or something, had physically interrupted every feed. Maintenance logs later showed the outages lasted exactly 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, nobody knows what happened out there. At least officially. Because I remember what happened. I heard my name continuously. Not shouting, not screaming, just speaking, patiently, like someone waiting for me to answer. Every few minutes it moved closer, different directions, same voice. My voice. Then another strange detail appeared. Footprints, fresh footprints crossing the dirt road. One set, heading toward the forest. The tread pattern matched my work boots exactly. I checked my boots twice. The prints weren't mine. They couldn't be. Yet every mark matched perfectly. Same wear pattern, same damaged heel, same size. Cooper looked at them and immediately radioed headquarters. For the first time all night, he sounded scared. Around 2 a.m., searchlights appeared. Additional rangers arrived. Nobody explained why. Nobody said what they were looking for. Then one ranger approached me carrying a clipboard. He asked me to verify my employee information, name, address, date of birth. I thought it was some kind of emergency procedure. Then I saw another document underneath. It contained my information already filled out. Every detail was correct, except the signature. Someone had signed my name earlier that evening. Hours before I arrived, I remember staring at that signature. It wasn't close, it wasn't similar, it was exact. Every curve, every stroke, mine. I felt physically sick. Nobody could explain it. Around 2:30 a.m., the voices stopped, completely. The silence felt worse. Search teams spread through the woods until sunrise. They found nothing. No speakers, no trespassers, no evidence. Nothing except footprints, lots of them, all matching different people. Campers, employees, rangers. Every trail eventually led toward a small clearing merely 2 miles east of camp, a place nobody could explain. The ground there was covered with overlapping footprints heading inward, almost none heading back out, yet nobody was missing. Everyone was accounted for. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I quit 2 weeks later. Cooper retired that same year. We never spoke again. For a long time I convinced myself the whole thing had some rational explanation. Maybe organized harassment, maybe copied signatures, maybe audio tricks. Then last fall, 5 years after everything happened, I received a large envelope with no return address. Inside was a stack of campground incident reports, photocopies. Dozens of them. Every report involved people hearing their names after dark. Every report ended the same way. No conclusion, no explanation. Then I reached the final page. The report date was from the week after I quit. Attached was a photograph taken by one of the Eastern Trail cameras during those missing 11 minutes. The image showed a dirt path illuminated the first day of the day stood, and the first time the great scene came. My son made me so happy. He felt the power of my spirits made, my best friends, or my own, my faith, my pure. I hope to show him a piece. The timestamp matched a moment when I was sitting inside the ranger station surrounded by witnesses. But that wasn't the part that keeps me awake. Across the bottom of the photo, someone had written a note in red ink. Just one sentence. This one finally looked back. Story 2. I slammed on the brakes so hard the patrol truck skidded sideways across the dirt road because the tent was there again. Same faded green canvas. Same torn rainfly hanging off one corner. Same crooked aluminum pole bent inward like a broken finger. The problem was that I'd personally marked its location 3 hours earlier with bright orange survey tape nearly a mile away. My flashlight beam shook across the clearing as I stared at it, and then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The orange survey tape I'd tied around a tree at the first location was now tied to the tent zipper. I don't mean another piece of tape. I mean the exact same strip. It had my initials written on it in black marker. How had it gotten here before I did? And who had moved it? The woods around me were completely silent, except for the distant hum of my truck engine. Then a voice crackled through my radio. Unit 7, what's your location? I grabbed the microphone but froze. Someone answered before I could. A voice using my call sign. My voice. Unit 7. I'm standing beside the tent. I dropped the radio. For a second, I genuinely thought someone was standing behind me. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing. Just trees. Endless black trees. That's the moment I realized something was very, very wrong. My name's Ethan. I'm 31 years old, and 2 years ago I worked seasonal night patrol at a remote national forest campground in northern Montana. Most of my job was boring, checking campsites, logging vehicle plates, making sure people weren't lighting fires where they shouldn't. The forest covered hundreds of square miles, and at night you could drive for hours without seeing another person. About a week before all this happened, I found an abandoned tent near an unofficial trail. That wasn't unusual. Campers sometimes left deer behind. The strange part was that every morning the tent seemed to be somewhere else. At first I thought other rangers were moving it. Then I thought maybe hikers were dragging it around as some stupid prank. But nobody ever admitted touching it, and nobody ever saw anyone move it. The first morning I found it near campsite 12. The next morning, it was beside a creek nearly half a mile away. 2 days later, it appeared near an old maintenance road. Every location was logged. Every location was different. Nobody could explain it. The tent itself never changed. Same damage, same stains, same missing stakes. That's what bothered me. It was always unmistakably the same tent. One night my supervisor finally told me to photograph it and collect evidence if I found it again. So I started paying closer attention. That's when things became impossible to ignore. One evening around midnight I discovered fresh footprints circling the tent. Only one set, size 11 boots. They appeared from the woods, walked around the tent twice, and then stopped. Not turned around, not continued, just stopped. The ground beyond them was untouched. I spent 20 minutes searching with my flashlight. Nothing. No additional tracks. No sign of a person leaving. It made absolutely no sense. The next night I found the tent again. New location. Same condition. Same weird footprints. But this time something else was there. A folding chair. It faced the tent entrance. Whoever placed it there had positioned it perfectly, as if they'd been sitting and watching the tent for hours. The chair was damp from dew. Empty. I searched the surrounding woods. Nobody. I remember radioing dispatch and joking that maybe the tent was moving itself. Nobody laughed. A few nights later, things escalated. Around 2 a.m., I found the tent beside an abandoned picnic area that had been closed for years. There was a notebook sitting on the folding chair, just a cheap spiral notebook. I opened it expecting random garbage. Instead, I found dates. Hundreds of dates. Each page contained a location. Nothing else. Just dates and coordinates. The coordinates matched places throughout the forest. Some were campsites. Some were trails. Some were old roads. The final entry was dated 3 days into the future. Beside it was a location. And underneath that location, someone had written my full name. I nearly dropped the notebook. I'd never seen it before. Nobody should have known I'd be the ranger assigned that route 3 days later. Yet there it was. My name, my patrol sector, my future schedule. I brought the notebook back to headquarters. Nobody could identify the handwriting. Nobody knew where it came from. The weirdest part was that the future patrol assignment listed beside my name hadn't even been finalized yet. That information wasn't public. The supervisor actually accused me of making the notebook myself until dispatch confirmed the schedule hadn't existed when I found it. That's when people stopped joking about the tent. 2 nights later, the tent disappeared completely. Not moved. Done. We searched for hours. Nothing. No tracks. No signs. No tent. Honestly, I felt relieved. I felt whatever weirdness was happening had finally ended. Then at 1:47 a.m. the next night, dispatch received a call from a camper reporting an abandoned campsite deep in the restricted section of the forest. Guess what was there? The tent. It had somehow appeared 15 miles away, a location inaccessible by vehicle. When I arrived, I found something new. A lantern was hanging from a branch nearby. The lantern was lit, fresh fuel, warm glass. Somebody had been there minutes earlier. That's when I started feeling watched, not in a dramatic way. Just little things. Glimpses of movement between trees, snapped branches behind me, radio static that sounded almost like breathing. One night, I heard footsteps pacing around my parked truck while I sat inside writing reports. Every time I looked outside, nothing was there. Then came the Cerny tape incident. I wanted proof that the tent was moving after I'd left. So I wrapped fluorescent tape around several nearby trees and photographed everything. GPS coordinates, timestamps, multiple angles. There was no way anyone could move the tent without disturbing those markers. 3 hours later, I returned during another patrol loop. The tent was gone. The marked clearing was empty. The tape remained untouched. I followed the road another mile and found the tent waiting in a new clearing. My survey tape was attached to the zipper. That's the night the radio answered in my voice. After that, I stopped working alone. Another ranger named Caleb started accompanying me. At least, that was the plan. Around 3 a.m. we received a report of suspicious lights near an old fire road. We drove out together. The tent was there. New location. Caleb stepped out first. I was maybe 30 feet behind him. Then he stopped walking. Just froze. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I listened. Nothing. "Hear what?" He turned slowly. His face looked pale. "Someone's talking." I couldn't hear anything. Then Caleb started walking toward the woods. Not the tent, the trees. "Caleb?" No response. He kept moving. I grabbed his shoulder. He jerked backward like he'd been shocked. "Didn't you hear him?" he asked. "Hear who?" Caleb stared at me for several seconds. "The guy calling your name." We left immediately. Caleb requested reassignment the next day. He never told anyone exactly what he'd heard. The final incident happened 3 nights later. I was finishing patrol near dawn when dispatch called asking why I hadn't checked in for nearly an hour. I told them I'd been driving Route 6. Silence followed. Then dispatch asked me to repeat myself. Apparently another Unit 7 had already checked in from Route 6 40 minutes earlier, using my call sign, using my voice. They even provided GPS coordinates that matched the tent's latest location. I drove there as fast as I could. The clearing was empty except for the tent. For the first time, the zipper was open. I don't know why, but I walked closer. Inside was another patrol uniform. Mine. Same name patch. Same radio model. Same flashlight. Same notebook. Everything looked weathered, dirty, and old, as if it had been sitting there for years. Then I noticed a patrol log resting on top. I opened it. The handwriting was mine. Every entry described events I hadn't experienced yet. Future patrols, future conversations, future incidents. The final page contained one sentence. Do not let him see you first. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps. Running. I spun around. Nobody. But something was moving through trees, fast, keeping pace with me. I ran to the truck and got out of there. By the time backup arrived, the tent was gone. Completely gone. We never found it again. Not once. I quit that job 2 weeks later. Most people think it was stress or exhaustion. Maybe they're right. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. Last year, nearly 18 months after I left Montana, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed that same tent sitting in a clearing. On the back was a handwritten note. My handwriting, my name, and beneath it, a date that hasn't happened yet. The date is next month. And every once in a while, usually around 2:00 in the morning, my phone buzzes with a voicemail notification. The message is always silent, except for footsteps, and somewhere in the background, the zipper slowly opening. Story 3. The radio exploded with static, so loud it made me jump, and then a man's voice whispered my name from somewhere in the darkness ahead. Not over the radio, not behind me, ahead of me. I swung my flashlight toward the trail and nearly fell backward. Standing 30 yards away was the missing hiker we'd spent 3 days searching for. His yellow rain jacket was impossible to mistake. The problem was that the official search had ended 72 hours earlier, and according to the report filed that morning, nobody had seen him alive in over a week. He wasn't waving for help. He wasn't moving at all. He was just standing there in the beam of my flashlight, staring directly at me. Then my radio crackled again. Unit 12, do not approach the subject. I froze. Nobody should have known what I was looking at. I hadn't reported it yet. My name is Ryan Mercer. I was 29 years old at the time, working seasonal night patrol in the Olympic National Forest in Washington State. Most nights were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Long hours driving dirt roads, checking trailheads, making sure nobody was camping where they shouldn't be. The forest could feel endless after midnight. Miles of darkness, rain-soaked trees, and empty roads. The missing hiker's name was Daniel Kessler, 34, experienced outdoorsman. He'd gone hiking alone and never returned. By the time I got involved, search and rescue teams had already spent days looking for him. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, drones. Hundreds of people combed the forest. Nothing. Eventually, the official search ended. Everyone hated ending searches. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but after enough time passes, resources run out. 3 nights after the search ended, I was assigned patrol near the Eastern Trail System where Daniel had last been seen. Around 2:11 a.m., dispatch called asking me to inspect a gate that someone had reported open. I found the gate closed, locked. No sign anyone had touched it. I logged the report and started heading back toward my truck. That's when the radio burst into static. Then came the voice, my name. Not dispatch, not another ranger, just my name. Quiet. Like someone testing whether I'd answer. A few seconds later, I saw the man standing on the trail. The yellow rain jacket, the hiking backpack, the beard. Even in poor light, I recognized him from the missing person flyers. Daniel Kessler. The man we'd spent days searching for. The man who shouldn't have been there. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, I had visual on. Static interrupted me. Then a different voice came through. My own voice. Negative. Nobody's here. I stopped speaking immediately. The transmission ended. Dispatch never responded. For several seconds, I just stood there trying to understand what had happened. When I looked back toward the trail, Daniel was gone. Not walking away. Gone. The trail stretched empty between the trees. I ran forward. Nothing. No movement, no flashlight, no footsteps. Just darkness. The ground was muddy from recent rain. There should have been tracks. There weren't. That bothered me more than anything. The next night I returned to the same area. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I checked the exact location where I'd seen it. Nothing. No evidence. No sign anyone had been there. I convinced myself exhaustion had played tricks on me. Then I found the water bottle. I was sitting beside the trail marker, one of those expensive stainless steel bottles hikers carry. Daniel's name was engraved on the side.
I recognized it immediately from the search photos. I called dispatch. They told me to bring it in. Simple enough. But when I picked it up, something rattled inside. A folded piece of paper. I opened it. The paper was dry despite being sealed inside a wet bottle. There was only one sentence written on it. Stop looking after 2:14. No explanation. No signature. Nothing else. The timestamp bothered me because it was currently 2:12 a.m. I checked my watch twice, maybe 3 times. At exactly 2:14 a.m., every light on my truck shut off. Headlights, dashboard, spotlight, everything. The engine kept running, but every light died simultaneously. The forest became pitch black. Then I heard footsteps, walking around the truck. Slow, deliberate, crunch, crunch. I grabbed my flashlight. The footsteps stopped. I stepped outside. Nobody. Nothing. The woods looked empty, but my driver's door was open.
I was absolutely certain I'd closed it. That's when I noticed something worse. The water bottle was gone. I'd left it on the passenger seat. Now it wasn't there. I searched the truck twice. Nothing. The bottle had simply disappeared. The following day, I checked records from the search operation. That's when another strange detail surfaced. One volunteer claimed he'd seen Daniel on day 4 of the search, alive, standing beside a creek. The volunteer approached him. Daniel walked behind a cluster of trees, then vanished. The simple "out" report was dismissed. People assumed stress or poor visibility. But now, I wasn't so sure. The next few nights became increasingly strange. Reports started coming in, campers hearing whistles, hikers seeing flashlights where nobody should have been. One couple claimed a man in a yellow rain jacket watched their campsite for nearly an hour. By the time rangers arrived, he was gone, always gone, never found. Then came the radio transmissions. Those scared me more than anything. At random times, dispatch would receive check-ins from Unit 12. My unit, my call sign, my voice. The problem was that I wasn't making them. One recording placed me 10 miles away from my actual location. Another reported a completed patrol route I'd never driven. The timestamps matched real-time transmissions. Nobody could explain it. Management suspected equipment malfunction. I knew better. Equipment doesn't know your voice. One night I requested access to archived recordings. There were 6 unauthorized transmissions. The final one lasted 27 seconds. For most of it, my voice repeated routine patrol information. Then came the last sentence. A sentence I never said. He's closer now. The recording ended immediately afterward. Nobody knew who he was. I wish I could tell you that was the worst part. It wasn't. The worst part happened 6 nights after my first sighting. Around 1:50 a.m., I received a report of an abandoned vehicle near an unofficial trail. I drove out to investigate. The vehicle belonged to Daniel Kessler, the missing hiker. It shouldn't have been there. Search teams had already examined it days earlier. Yet somehow it had appeared again. Same location, same condition, like it had never been removed. I approached carefully. The doors were unlocked. Inside, I found fresh mud on the driver's floorboard. Fresh, not week-old mud. Fresh. Someone had been inside recently. Then I found a receipt, gas station receipt, timestamped that morning, 3 days after the search officially ended. 3 days after Daniel supposedly disappeared forever. I radioed dispatch. No response. Only static. Then a voice. "Don't follow him." The voice sounded terrified. Nail, breathing heavily. I recognized it immediately. Daniel, the missing hiker. I nearly dropped the microphone. Then the transmission cut out. Silence. I should have left. Honestly, that's exactly what I should have done. Instead, I followed a set of muddy footprints leading away from the vehicle. The tracks continued into the woods. At first, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed the stride length. Every footprint was perfectly spaced, exactly the same distance apart, for hundreds of yards, like someone had measured each step. No variation, no slips, no corrections. Human beings don't walk like that, not through rough terrain. The tracks eventually led to an old fire lookout tower that had been abandoned for years. I climbed halfway up. Then I saw movement above me. A figure, standing at the top platform. Yellow rain jacket, watching. I shouted. No answer. I climbed faster. The figure didn't move, didn't react, didn't even shift position. When I finally reached the platform, nobody was there. Nobody. Just an empty observation deck. And something sitting on the floor. A search and rescue photograph. One of the photos used during the operation, Daniel's photo. Except someone had crossed out his face with black marker. Written underneath were 3 words. Still looking down. I left immediately. The next morning I submitted a transfer request. Denied. Staff shortages. Typical. 2 nights later, everything finally came to a head. At exactly 2:14 a.m., every radio channel in our district activated simultaneously. Dispatch, patrol, maintains, search and rescue. All at once. Every speaker emitted the same sound. A man breathing. Nothing else, just breathing. Hundreds of radios. Same audio. Same timing. For nearly 30 seconds. Then one sentence. "We can see him." Nobody knew who spoke. Nobody admitted transmitting it. Afterward, several rangers reported seeing someone standing near various trails. Same yellow jacket. Same backpack. Same motionless posture. Always watching. Never approaching. Never speaking. The sightings continued for weeks. Then suddenly stopped. No explanation. No closure. Nothing. A month later, authorities officially declared Daniel Kessler deceased. Case closed. That's what the paperwork says. But here's the part I never included in my report. A year after I left that job, I received an email from an unknown address. No message, just an attachment. A photograph. The image showed a section of trail deep inside Olympic National Forest. Standing in the center was a man wearing a yellow rain jacket, facing away from the camera. The timestamp in the corner caught my attention. The photo had been taken 3 days after the email was sent. Not before. After. At first I assumed the metadata was corrupted. Then I zoomed in. Someone had written something on the back of a trail marker beside the figure. 3 words. Barely visible. Just enough to read. Search ends tomorrow. The date in that photograph matched the exact date I opened the email. And according to the metadata, the person who took the picture was me.